They lined them up in front of a church and they literally beheaded every single one of those 70 people.
And the only reason these 70 people were picked up was because they were Christians.
It just goes to show that people fear this ideology. People are afraid to speak up against it. It's the same thing that's happening in Nigeria as well. In Boko Haram, a lot of Nigerians are being killed by this ideology.
And it doesn't make the news.
It doesn't make the news.
I didn't even know there were Muslims in Congo.
I have family in Congo. There's no pandemic. I can tell you that for free. There's no pandemic. So they used a cover-up story to kind of silence what actually happened, which is 70 Christians were beheaded by the ADF, which has ties to ISIS. If you think I'm a patriot, my parents are 10 times more patriot. They love this country. If there's a royal wedding, they'll be there watching it for hours. If there's a coronation, they'll be there watching it for hours. If England is playing, they'll be there waving their flags. They absolutely love this country. And not only that, it's just basic common sense. The infrastructure of our country is not moving at the same rate as the number of people coming in. We have so many issues, housing issues, hospital issues. Just to book an appointment is an issue. We have so many issues, but yet we are importing millions of people. It does not make any sense.
Is it just colonialism that's the root cause of all the problems in Africa?
I think the church has just been indoctrinated by Marxism, and we're being preached this very baby message, which is just pray about it, kumbaya, everything's going to be okay, rather than actually going out and actively defending these people.
Do people still talk about that famous boxing match between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman?
Yes, I think that was the only proper infamous moment that Congo has had. The Arab slave trade was definitely more gruesome than the actual British slave trade or the Atlantic slave trade, but no one likes to talk about that.
And no one's protesting. We talked about the media, but we forgot to say no one even protested about it. Welcome to another episode of You Decide podcast. Today I have a friend of mine who I'm going to call by her YouTube channel handle, BasedandBougie, because that's what you asked me to call you by, yeah?
Yes, it's easier for people to find me that way.
That's right.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us what that means, BasedandBougie?
Yeah, so based basically means to just have a very strong-headed mindset and to just not allow people to just shake you, whilst bougie just means being girly, which everyone knows that about me.
So a strong-minded girl that
a strong-minded
doesn't
feminine,
allow you to push her around.
Yes, a strong-minded feminine Christian woman. And it's actually a play on to a very famous song called Bad and Bougie, which was my favourite song. Very inappropriate song, but I kind of remixed it to Based and Bougie now. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And let me tell you that I've done about 7 podcasts with You Decide so far, and you're actually the first female on my show. And we know each other through our work with another group, LBL, or London by Londoners. Do you want to say a little bit to the subscribers what London by Londoners is?
Yeah, so London by Londoners, which you guys can all find on Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. It's We Are LBL.
Mainly Instagram, though. That's
mainly Instagram,
strength, isn't it?
Yeah. It's basically a media page where we have a bunch of journalists who are like-minded,
Independent
journalists who are like-minded on very conservative views. We basically share our opinions on all the matters that's going on in the UK, and that's basically what we do.
And we just discuss the issues help a discourse.
Bring discourse online. That's what we're good at.
Exactly. But today, the reason I've asked you to come here is because I watched the video, quite a horrific video, and for obvious reasons, I'm not going to show it on this podcast. And the video is around 70 Christians in Congo being hacked to death by an Islamist group. And immediately I thought about you because your parents come from Congo. I asked you to verify the video. I sent you the video, if you remember, and I asked you to verify it, and you said, yes, it happened on 13th of February. So what happened on 13th of February? What was that video about?
So on February 13th, there was this group that has ties to ISIS, so it's basically an Islamic group. They decided to go into...
What are they called?
They are called the ADF, which is the Allied Democratic Forces. So they decided to go into a village in Congo called Kisangani, and they decided to round up people. So this happened around 3 to 4 a.m. at night. So they first started to round up 20 people. They all lined them up, tied them up behind with their arms and with their legs, and then they found another 50 people. Mind you, this is women, this is children, this is men. They lined them up in front of a church and they literally beheaded every single one of those 70 people. Can you imagine the gruesome act of chopping 70 people's head? Can you imagine just how much blood was spilled on that day? And the victims were Christians, and it was very gruesome. So yeah, that's what happened.
It really was a gruesome video. I wouldn't like to watch it again at all. And the only reason these 70 people were picked up was because they were Christians.
Yeah, and the reason why they specifically done it in front of a church, mind you, these people, they were all in their homes, all in their little, where they lived. They literally made them walk for God knows how long in front of the church and killed them to basically make a statement saying that your Christian faith is a sin and because of that you do not deserve to live. So imagine that kind of ideology telling people that because you have a different faith, you deserve to die. Whereas Christians or other religions, Sikhs, Jews, Catholics, they don't do that.
I mean, imagine if the IDF had beheaded or hacked to death 70 Palestinians or something. The media would be all over the place. But the only place where I could find the news of this, I can call it a massacre, that I could come up with was in some of the Christian sites like Open Doors, and there was like a Catholic website, but basically only Christian websites. No mainstream media covered it. Why do you think that is?
Well, there's two reasons why mainstream media didn't cover it. Going back to your point where you said that it was only Christian pages that actually informed the world about what was going on, I realised that there was a lot of pages, public figures that people would consider to be the far right who actually exposed it. For example, I know Tommy Robinson's page, they exposed it. Pastor Ricky Doolan, the media has called him a far right. He posted it. Nick Tenkoni, the leader of UKIP, he's also holding a march. And the second reason why they didn't do it is because the media loves selective outrage. They only like to publicize stories that suits their image. So they decided not to do it. And what they did instead, if you don't mind me going on about what they did instead, is they decided to create a news story saying that there's this pandemic that's spreading in Congo. I have family in Congo. There's no pandemic. I can tell you that for free. There's no pandemic. So they used a cover-up story to kind of silence what actually happened, which is 70 Christians were beheaded by the ADF, which has ties to ISIS. And a third reason why there was no media coverage is because, of course, Congo, even though it's called the Democratic Republic of Congo, it is a socialist country. So you don't have the freedom to say what you want to say. And the way we can here in the UK, I can just get my iPhone, post it on YouTube. If you do that in Congo, you could literally get killed. So, yeah, it's such a shame. Yeah.
And I want to talk to you a little bit about Congo because I didn't even know there were Muslims in Congo. It came to me as a surprise that there was an ISIS-affiliated group calling itself Allied Democratic Forces. And I always wonder, why do these repressive countries and groups like this, they always use the word democratic in their name. It's like Democratic Republic of Korea, which is like the North Koreans. There's nothing democratic about them. I was very surprised that there were actually Muslims in Congo. I mean, I don't know much about Congo. That's why I'm talking to you, because you're more of an expert, because your roots come from Congo. What percentage of the population is Muslims in Congo?
I believe it's about 20 to 25%. Yeah, so it's a predominantly Christian country, and so they only have a population of 20 to 25% Muslims. But how that small percentage of people managed to do that, and there's no uproar and there's no outrage, it just goes to show that people fear this ideology. People are afraid to speak up against it. It's the same thing that's happening in Nigeria as well. In Boko Haram, a lot of Nigerians are being killed by this ideology.
And it doesn't make the news.
It doesn't make the news because the media, they're very selective on what they want to portray as the villain and what they want to portray as the hero. So it's just a shame. It's very disgusting.
What was the reaction within Congo itself? Was there outright condemnation by the mainstream, by the government, by the churches there? By the rest of the Muslim community who don't identify with the ADF?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in Congo there was no outrage, and even if they were outraged, they couldn't do anything about it, because although they say that Congo is a democratic country, is actually a socialist country, meaning if you say anything to counter powerful people, for example the ADF or the government, you could literally die the next day. Not only that, they don't have enough protection. They don't have laws to protect freedom of speech, freedom to protest. Those things don't really exist, and if you do take that risk to do that, you are basically risking your life. Now, as you can imagine, most Congolese people, they are living in poverty. So to be living in poverty and then to also risk potentially dying, it's too much of a threat for these people. So that's why, people like ourselves in the UK almost have a duty to speak up for these people. Yeah.
And you're born here, and your parents came from Congo, and because I know you're very patriotic British. what is it that makes you, even though your roots go back to Congo, what is it that makes you appreciate what this country has done?
Yeah, because obviously when I see the footage of what's going on in Congo, first of all, people being beheaded, you're having kids who are literally mining with their bare hands cobalt for our phones and our laptops and things like that. I just know my life could have been a lot different if my parents didn't take that risk to come to this country where there's just an abundance of opportunity. Not only that, my parents always do tell me about their upbringing. The upbringing wasn't the best. Like, my parents used to sell cakes together and they barely even had enough money to even buy things like pads or buy even just a meal sometimes. And even if they did try to sell by themselves or sell their own things, sometimes you would have these like market police who love to police what people were selling. Whereas when you come here into the UK, you can set up a business in 3 days. You can, hustle your way. My dad, for example, he was a bin man and he went all the way up to a doctor. So from a young age, my parents have always instilled into me and my siblings just how much our lives could have been completely different if we lived in socialist Congo, but we're actually living in capitalist UK, where you have these abundance of opportunity, you have freedom of speech as well. And that's why I'm such a patriot for this country.
So even though that you have an immigrant background yourself, I'm sure a lot of people say to you, like, because I know you're against this unlimited, unvetted, uncontrolled immigration that's going on at the moment. Even though that you have that immigrant background, I'm sure a lot of people would ask you, like, because you're an immigrant, second generation yourself. Why are you against unlimited, uncontrolled, unvetted immigration? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and it's very simple. Someone has been in this country for 20 years, for example, myself. I work very hard, my 9 to 5. I pay my taxes. I barely get any rest. And then you have someone who's come into the country like 3 days ago. They already have a free phone. They're already living in a castle, and they are getting £3,000 worth of benefits. Where is the fairness in that? And it's like when you try to tell people this, because they're so indoctrinated by this socialist mindset, they cannot see it. Not only that, yes, my parents were also immigrants, but times were very, very different when they first came here. First of all, it took my dad 4 years to come here. That's how strict it was. And now you can just come here if you just decide, I want to be here. I saw a TikTok of a guy literally just filming his trip. He went from being on, the desert to being on this like Air Force plane and then straight to the UK just like that. It is not fair. And not only that, it's just basic common sense. The infrastructure of our country is not moving at the same rate as the number of people coming in. We have so many issues, housing issues, hospital issues. Just to book an appointment is an issue. We have so many issues, but yet we are importing millions of people. It does not make any sense. So for all the people who like to judge me for being critical of immigration, it has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with bringing prejudice. It just has to do with common sense. The infrastructure of our country is not moving at the same rate, and it makes no sense that someone who just arrived here yesterday gets all these benefits, all these opportunities, whilst we kind of slave away to fund this nonsense for them. It makes no sense.
And also another point is that your parents came to this country because they liked the way of living in this country and they were prepared to integrate, whereas we have these uncontrolled, unvetted immigrants that are coming over that want to impose their own culture and impose their own way of living and destroy the fabric of this country. So that's another point that's very different. Would you not agree with me on that?
No, my parents, if you think I'm a patriot, my parents are 10 times more patriot. They love this country. If there's a royal wedding, they'll be there watching it for hours. If there's a coronation, they'll be there watching it for hours. If England is playing, they'll be there waving their flags. They absolutely love this country. And that's what you're supposed to do when you go into a country. You integrate. Do you understand? Whereas there's a certain group of people who are coming here and they want to impose their values, they want to impose their laws, they want to impose their religion. And my thing is just, why don't you just go back to your country and do it? But I strongly encourage these people at this point, just continue. And when this country turns into the country that these people have escaped from, I triple dare you guys to come back to me again and ask me, why was I complaining about immigration? I really do. And it's just as simple as, like, if you want to go to India, you go to India to experience Indian culture. If you want to go to the UAE and experience UAE culture, you go there. If you want to go to Pakistan and you want to experience their culture, you go there. I'm in the United Kingdom. I want to experience British culture. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see all these different cultures combined that has zero tolerance for anything. And it's just, when you come into a country, integrate, support the country you live in, or just live in the country that you support.
Going back to Congo, 70 innocent people have been hacked, women, children, hacked to death just for being Christians. This can't go on anymore, can it? What's the future for Christians, even though they're, from what you said, they're like 80% majority?
Yeah.
If they can't sort of take a stand against that, what's the future for them?
Well, biblically, if you actually read the Bible, it's actually going to get harder for us Christians. It's not going to get any easier. The persecution is going to come harder on us. The Bible says that, they would hate us simply by Jesus Christ's name. However, it is our duty as Christians to try to defend these Christians as much as possible, just because we know, the end times is near and the persecution is going to get worse. So that doesn't mean we sit there silently. So unfortunately, it is going to get worse for Christians because that's what Scripture says. However, that does not mean us Christians or non-Christians too have to sit there and just watch it happen and shrug our shoulders. We have a duty as well to say something.
Your local church, the one that you go to, what is it? What church denomination
is
do you belong to?
Pentecostal.
So you go to a Pentecostal church. Has this issue been discussed there?
Yes, it actually has been discussed. Yeah, last Sunday, I believe. Yeah, we did a prayer for the church, which is a little bit unfortunate because I feel like, yes, you can pray, but at the same time, there should be action behind it. There should be a charity behind it, which is something that's also lacking in churches, and which is why people are not really taking Christianity seriously and swaying more towards religions like Islam, because they're very active. They're very like, this is what we're going to do and we're going to follow through with it. Whilst us Christians, we are starting to take this very, let's just pray and kumbaya and just pray everything's going to be okay. And biblically, that's not what God would want from us, actually. If you read scripture, Jesus created havoc. I think the church has just been indoctrinated by Marxism, and we're being preached this very like baby message, which is just like, pray about it, kumbaya, everything's going to be okay, rather than actually going out and actively defending these people. So yeah.
But the government in Congo, are they mainly Christians or are they mixed? Or
they're fake Christians. If they were true Christians, they wouldn't be allowing half of the things that's going on in Congo to happen. The same way you said that certain countries just put democratic for decorations, most governments, they just put Christian and they just do short prayers for decoration, but really and truly they're not. The only thing they really worship is money. And that's why Congo is in the state that it's in, because most of the money is centralized, is going into the government, and it's not actually even going into the actual country. So, yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about Congo. We always hear about the young generation. They always blame colonialism and all the problems that are going on in Africa. Is it just colonialism that's the root cause of all the problems in Africa?
Yeah, so this idea that certain African countries are not as developed as others due to colonialism is so boring and is so tired. It's been almost 100 years now that we've had independence. We can't keep sitting here and blaming colonialism. It makes no sense. And if we're going to say it's colonialism, why does Singapore have a higher GDPR than the UK right now as we speak? And they're an ex-colony. The difference between Singapore and the difference between a country like Congo is that after independence, Singapore decided to take the capitalist route of doing things, the democratic, not the fake democratic, but the real democratic route of doing things. So they learned from the UK what they were doing to make money, and they applied that. Now, with certain African countries like Ghana, what else is there? Congo, what they did is they were almost very bitter about what happened with colonialism and all the trauma that it caused the nation. So they decided to almost be petty and take the opposite route, which is follow Russia and the USSR, and they decided to implement socialism into the country. Now, one thing about socialism is it never works. It never works. This idea that the government is controlling everything is centralized, it does not work. You will not see a prosperous country if a group of people are controlling one thing. If you want to see a country prosper, you have to allow every single person to have their own individual freedom to go out and make money. And what's happening in Congo is that we are still living under this socialist state, even though we're called democratic. And that's why many people are struggling. So no, it has nothing to do with colonialism. Colonialism is dead. And if it was colonialism, Singapore wouldn't be thriving the way it is. Nigeria wouldn't be thriving the way it is. Another thing I realize is most of the African countries that are doing well, they were ex-British colonies. Whereas if you look at the colonies that were ruled by like Belgium and Portugal, they're doing very, very bad. But nobody likes to talk about the good things that come out of Britain. Everybody just likes to talk about the fact that, oh, people were slaves, and slavery is a part of human history. It's unfortunate, but it is a part of human history. But the education, the rule of law, democracy, capitalism, these are beautiful things that if we had taken that as a lesson and applied it, we didn't even have to be British, but just applied those things, then our countries would have been thriving. And then what happened is I know I'm waffling and going on, but what happened is that a lot of these African countries, 20 years into independence, they started to become dependent on these Western countries. They became dependent on the UK. They became dependent on China. And then during the 80s and 90s, what you saw was a lot of immigrants now wanting to go to the UK, like my parents, because it was too difficult. So say what you want about the British Empire. There were a lot of atrocities that no one has ever denied, but there was a lot of good things that me, myself, you, yourself is benefiting from that people do not like to acknowledge, because a lot of young people have just been indoctrinated by this socialist programming that's going on in schools.
You mentioned the slave trade, and I was doing a little bit of reading. I was just like basically reading Wikipedia about Congo before the interview, and it looks like that actually Islam was introduced in Congo by a Arab slave owner who is better known as Tiputip, but his real name is, I have to get my phone out to read his name. Tiputip, who lived between 1837 and 1905, and his real name is Hamad ibn Muhammad ibn Juma ibn Rajab ibn Muhammad ibn Said al-Murjabi, and he was an Afro-Omani ivory and slave owner and trader, explorer, governor and plantation owner. But you never hear these woke mob say anything about the Arab slave owners and Arab slave traders, do you? It's always like, the British is the target, whereas the British, if anything, they made the most contribution into stopping the slave trade.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's literally just selective outrage. They pick and choose which group they want to demonize. The Arab slave trade was definitely more gruesome than the actual British slave trade or the Atlantic slave trade. But no one likes to talk about that. And what you've even told me, I didn't know about this, because when I was growing up in school, they didn't educate me on this. It was just British. These people are demonic. And basically what they are trying to do is they are trying to demonize goodness. They are trying to demonize conservatism. They are trying to demonize democracy. They are trying to demonize capitalism. They're trying to demonize this culture that is good.
Demonize patriotism.
Patriotism as well. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to creep in this socialism into our education system. And that's why you have a lot of young people like myself that don't even know about these Arab slave traders. And for the people who do know about these Arab slave trades, the reason why they refuse to talk about it is because, let's be real, Islam is quite scary to talk about. It's very scary. They're very you cannot say anything bad about us, and if you do, there's consequences. Whereas us, particularly the British people, they've decided to take up this thing of tolerance. We have to be tolerant. We can't, say anything bad. We have to accept this. We have to accept that. And that's exactly why the country is starting to fall. So, yeah.
And going on to a more light-hearted matter, the very first time I think, heard about Congo was when Muhammad Ali was fighting George Foreman in what they called the country Zaire at the time, in Kinshasa. What was that chant that they used to say, Ali, kill him in Congolese? The Rumble in the Jungle.
Yes,
you remember that?
Yes.
And
I wasn't there, but...
No, I was, unfortunately.
Isn't that old?
So that was the first time I heard about the country. And like I say, at the time it was called Zaire. And then they changed the name to Congo. What is the proper name, and why did it change from Zaire to Congo?
I believe it was Mobutu who introduced the term Zaire, and then it got changed back to Congo after Mobutu's reign ended. But the specific reason to why it got changed, I actually don't know.
What do you call it yourselves at home?
I call it Congo. We
and
call
your
it
parents
Congo.
Call it
yeah.
Congo. You never refer to it as Zaire?
No, we don't refer to it as Zaire. We call it Congo. Obviously, the capital is Kinshasa, so sometimes we just call it Kin. Yeah, so Congo, Kin. And yeah.
Does it mean anything?
Kin is basically short for Kinshasa, which is the capital, which is where most of my family would stay or where most people would go if they are visiting Congo. So it's I'm going Kin, so I'm going to the capital, or you just say I'm going Congo. But yeah, it's basically we'd call it Congo. We don't call it Zaire anymore.
And do people still talk about that famous boxing match between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman.
Yes, I think that was the only like proper infamous moment that Congo has had. Obviously, because it's been struggling so much, we haven't had much opportunities to do anything great because we've had such corrupt governments. So literally the only great thing that's ever happened in Congo, I'm so sorry to say this, is the rumble in the jungle that happened. But apart from that, I think Congo is actually a great country with good people. We're very happy people. We're very funny people. We have great food as well. We love music. And the people there are just happy. It's so crazy because with how oppressed they are in that country, the ability to just be happy and kind as well. They're very giving. They could have nothing and they will offer you something. Amazes me. But I truly think that's because of Christianity. If it wasn't for Christianity, most Congolese people would have just been out here brutally killing each other, but they still have this spirit of like kindness and giving and charity with the little that they have, and that is due to Christianity. So it blows my mind how people are trying to kind of like wipe out Christianity from the face of the planet.
That's amazing because I mean they have suffered a lot of catastrophes from what I was reading, and especially the Belgians. I mean they've carried out some horrific massacres there, and to go through all that and still be like happy people. So basically, you're saying if it was governed properly, it'd be a fantastic country.
It would be fantastic. We have all the minerals in the world, by the way. Most of your computers, your phones, your cameras is all coming from Congo, just that one country. So we're very rich in resources, but we're very poor economically.
Did you know there was another thing that was attributed with Congo, and that was resource curse?
Oh, what does that
mean? Basically, it means that the resources, instead of being a blessing for you, they're actually a curse for Congo.
No, I never thought
because
of it
it's instead of like making people more affluent, it's causing so much corruption in the country.
Yeah,
and this is not something that you can blame on, like you say, the colonialism, the British rule, or even the Belgian rule, because when did Congo gain independence?
During the 1960s. I don't know what, 1965?
So you're talking about more than 60 years ago. So
yeah.
surely
exactly.
by now, like you said, you mentioned Singapore, they were a colony as well, but, why is it that they're not so hung up about it? Is there anything else you want to say about the situation of the Christians or what people watching this should do?
I would just say that now that you know this information, I strongly encourage you to just go online and spread awareness to what's happening, not just with the 70 Christians, but just what's happening in Congo. Right now, Congo is experiencing a genocide. Like you said, the curse has been our resources.
And no one's protesting. I mean, we talked about the media, but we forgot to say no one even protested about it.
There actually has been protests going on.
But not on the same level as we've seen for Gaza, for example.
Yeah.
Weekly protests throughout the whole UK. What was the protest? That
if it was white people who done it, I'm pretty sure the Congolese people would have. If it was Belgium who done it, but because it's an Islamic group, like the Islamic ideology has become such a fear and it's become such a threat. Not only that, it's protected by the establishment, it's protected by the media. So that's why people are like, I'm not really going to touch that area. But this is why patriots, the people who have been spreading awareness to it, for example, Turning Point, Nick Tanconi, Ricky Doolan, Tommy Robinson's page, these is why these people, they are so important. And like yourself today, you've called me to eventually post this on the YouTube channel. This is why people like yourself are so important. And why patriots are so important, because their ability to stand up for what's right, regardless of who the threat is, whether it's the establishment, whether it's the media, whether it's the police, whether it's the BBC, is why people like yourself are so important.
And what gets me really annoyed is when they try to correlate an ideology with a race. You're trying to be critical of an ideology, an extremist, evil ideology, and you label the racist. It's nothing to do with race. There are all sorts of races in this ideology. It's completely disconnected to any race at all. Well, look, I hope things will improve for Christians in Congo. And I wish the people of Congo, I only know you from Congo, but, the way you describe them to me, like very happy people, joyful people, and I wish that they have a better future. But thanks for coming to the You Decide podcast. Thanks for educating me about Congo and about what happened, and I wish you the very best for your YouTube channel. We actually started our YouTube channels both at the same time, didn't we? But,
yeah, we did.
You've done a lot better than me. You've now got over 11,000 subscribers. I'm still struggling to reach 10,000. So kudos to you.
Thank you so much.
I've definitely asked my subscribers to go on your YouTube channel and watch some of your videos. Thanks for coming again.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.